Hello, my friends. I'm here with Joel Bowers. He's filling a brand new role, and he's a brand new member of our staff team here at Wayzata Community Church as our Director of Online Ministries and Worship Innovation. Now, you met Joel on Sunday morning. If you joined us in online worship, we shifted to WCC at home because of the rise in COVID cases. And Joel sang with his daughter, Willow, and their dog, Samson, made a cameo appearance along with their 1.5-year-old daughter, Ruby, who took a spill in the background of the song. If you didn't see it, go back and watch it again. But I met Joel several years ago when he came to help us lead worship with our brand new Worship on Wednesday indoor service. But Joel and I reconnected this past summer when we started the search for a brand new position at the church. 2020. I mean, obviously it's brought unprecedented changes to the church, the biggest of which is that we're all being forced to connect digitally. From online worship to remote learning to virtual care and mission, it became really clear to us a couple of months ago that we needed to change many of our methods without compromising our mission. So in its great wisdom, our church council approved a new position, a full-time director of online ministry and worship innovation. And this is where we meet Joel Bowers. So Joel, welcome.
Hey, thanks, John.
We're so glad for you to be among us. I call this a just-in-time move by the church.
Oh, well, I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad for that, and I want to give a chance for the church to meet you here for a couple minutes briefly, so let's begin at the start of all things. I understand you were born at a very young age, so why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and your family of origin.
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in South Dakota. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. I was home educated because my dad loved to get away in the wintertime, because when it wasn't winter and plants were growing, we were out in the fields working 12-plus hour days. When I was 16, we expanded the farm to South America, to Brazil, and lived there for 2.5 years before I moved to Minneapolis. And that was a crazy time. Wow. Plenty of stories from that.
I got to say, you're the first farmer that I've ever hired.
Really?
Yeah, I'm excited about that, though, because obviously you've got a tremendous work ethic and aren't afraid to put in 16, 18-hour days, which is sometimes what it takes in a church.
If we ever buy a tractor, then, I mean, I can drive it for you.
Well, thank goodness, because who knows? After this year, I'm ready for anything. I want you to tell us a little bit about your family, some of whom we met this past Sunday. Tell us about everybody.
Yeah, so Nicole, my wife, she and I have been married since 2006. So coming up here this January on 15 years. We have 3 kids. Willow, who's 12, you got to hear her sing. Gabe, who was hiding upstairs on his iPad during that taping, he's 8. And then Ruby is 1.5.
Well, before you and Nicole were married, you were already quite busy and active serving churches around the country, but also right here in the Twin Cities. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience and some of the places you've been?
Yeah, so I moved to Minneapolis in 2003 and very quickly just dove into the megachurch music scene, as I call it, here in Minneapolis. So at the time, in 2003, Minneapolis had the largest number of megachurches per capita than anywhere else in the country. So you could have a full-time role in one church being the pastoral leader, the directional leader of the worship ministry, but then there was a church down the road that had service times where you could jump in as a contractor. So I did that for 14 years here in Minneapolis.
So, Joel, clearly you've worked in a lot of churches, most of which are a lot bigger than Wayzata Community Church, and many of which are much more evangelical in their theological orientation. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about the theological journey that you have experienced yourself and that I know you've shared with me?
Yeah, so I have worked in a lot of evangelical churches, a lot of very conservative environments. I actually grew up in an environment that excluded a lot of people. And so from a very early age, I've always had this love for God and for Jesus. And the Jesus that I saw in the Bible didn't line up with the exclusionary church world that I grew up in. So when I moved to Minneapolis, I decided that my own personal theology, my own personal philosophy of ministry is that the arms of Christ are just widening and welcoming more and more people. But there was a lot to learn in those evangelical environments. One of the churches, actually the most recent one that I served in a full-time capacity, was just up the road at Wayzata Free. And the thing that compelled me about that environment was they had an amazing intergenerational environment there. And I felt like I had a lot more to learn about spending time with different generations and figuring out how we can collaborate together. So regardless of theology, I've always found a place, an environment that challenges me and grows me, even if that doesn't line up with my own personal theology.
Well, I really appreciate that, Joel. And part of what made you a compelling candidate in my eyes is that I think we stand to learn a lot from you. People talk a lot about the political divide in our nation, but there's been a theological divide in Christendom for decades, and it's really a shameful reality for us. We are all sisters and brothers in Christ at the end of the day, and the degree to which we can understand each other better is the degree to which we can come together across those differences and in spite of them. So I'm grateful for your openness, but I really appreciate the path that led you to that place. It'll bless us along the way. Tell me a little bit about what sent you back to South Dakota 4 years ago. I know it was a very critical time in your life and an important part of your story. Why don't you share that with everyone?
My mother, who is this unifying force in our family, she's the glue that held all of us together. She got a very strange, sudden cancer diagnosis in 2016, in June. And she digressed very quickly and actually passed away 4 months later in September. And so we had been traveling back and forth a lot during her illness, just taking care of her, providing care. And after she passed, my dad needed help on the family farm. And so as hard as it was, we looked around at our lives in Minnesota here and decided that moving to South Dakota was the thing we needed to do. And it was a really great time for us to recenter. My wife is this amazing respiratory therapist with a lot of trauma and ER experience. She worked at HCMC for 12 years. So she was really busy. I was really busy doing the church thing and the freelance musician thing up here in Minneapolis. And so South Dakota, for the past 4 years, really provided this opportunity for us to really consolidate our lives and draw closer together as a family. It's an amazing gift, and we couldn't have done that if we would have stayed in Minnesota.
Well, that's a beautiful story. It's a difficult passage, but as we often speak about in worship, those are the times when God refines our lives and refocuses us on the things that matter most. So, what a gift you gave to your family in those years. Let's jump back to Wayzata for a minute, and then we'll wrap up. But how did you first hear about Wayzata Community Church, and why, at the end of the day, did you choose us? Because, we could extend the job to you, but you got to say yes. Why did you say yes to us?
Well, like you said, the first time I came in contact with Wayzata Community was about 6 years ago at the fall indoor WOW services that you guys had. I had reached out to Autumn just to say, hey, I'm down the road at Wayzata Free. I've heard about you guys. I'd love to connect. Would love to get to know you. And as Autumn does so well, she just gave me a job right away. She was like, hey, you need to come and be a part of these services. So I dove in, and I would say meeting Autumn and you and the rest of the staff And every person who came up to say hello, I was really impacted by the welcoming environment at Wayzata Community. It actually made me uncomfortable at first because I go, oh my gosh, these people are so loving and so inclusive. It was a bit of a shock, but it left an impact on me. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about Wayzata Community since the first time I walked through the doors.
Well, we are often accused of being awkwardly affectionate. We used to love to hug, but we don't get to do that anymore.
We don't.
At least not for a while, but soon enough we will. Speaking of that, like, just excited about what's to come. What are you most excited about at Wayzata Community Church?
Well, I'm most excited about what I'm calling Online Ministries 2.0. So what I'd classify as 1.0 is that time in March where we said we had to close our doors. We had to go online, start recording online worship. Family Ministries needed to figure out how to integrate and create touch points for the kids and the students that they're ministering to. And every ministry in Wayzata Community had to go online. And I would say that that was really amazing, but it was really reactive. Like, we have to do this. So Online Ministries 2.0 is how do we turn this online presence from a reaction into something that really benefits the church long term. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is create more authentic content. We just got done filming milestones with the Family Ministries team, both for high school, middle school, and for children's as well. And I was amazed as we sat there in the studio watching the amazing leaders in that ministry really guide kids along. We're now shooting WCC at home as we've all had to go back to our homes again and close the building down. I feel like we landed on something really amazing and authentic that just says, hey, we're all in this together. And then as we move into the holidays, we have a really exciting Christmas Eve service planned. We're offering one offering this year. You're going to start seeing trailers come up for that as we grow closer to Christmas Eve. But I'm very excited about that Christmas Eve film.
Well, we're very excited to have you in our presence, Joel. Really grateful for you saying yes. Looking forward to the upcoming, well, really right now we're counting by days. Eventually we'll be counting by weeks and months and years again soon. But for now, day in and day out, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for saying yes. Members of the congregation and community, feel free to reach out to Joel directly at the church if you have questions, thoughts, ideas. As he just said, we are indeed in all this in this all together. So let's continue on the path of ministry with one another. Have a great day, everybody.